In recent days, two separate actions by the United States have drawn close attention in London. The first was the sudden American military operation in Venezuela, which resulted in the capture of the country's president. The second followed shortly after. Renewed statements from Washington suggesting the United States could seek control over Greenland. While these events unfolded thousands of miles apart, British officials quickly recognised that together they raised serious questions about international law, alliance stability and Britain's own foreign policy position. The response from Prime Minister Keir Starmer has highlighted a clear distinction in how the UK views these two situations. The United States confirmed that its forces had captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro during a targeted operation. President Donald Trump later stated that the action was intended to bring political change to Venezuela and restore stability. The operation was carried out without the involvement of Britain or other European allies. It immediately raised concerns among legal experts and foreign policy officials, particularly around whether the action complied with international law and established norms of state sovereignty. For many governments, the central issue was not the fate of Mr. Maduro, but the precedent set by unilateral military action. In London, the government moved quickly to clarify Britain's position. Prime Minister Keir Starmer stated that the United Kingdom had no involvement in the US operation in Venezuela and had not been consulted in advance. He described the situation as fast-moving and said the priority was to establish the facts before drawing conclusions. Starmer also stressed that the UK's immediate focus was on the safety of British nationals in Venezuela and on maintaining diplomatic engagement through the British Embassy. This signalled that London was treating the development primarily as a consular and stability issue rather than a political endorsement of US action. When questioned directly about whether the United States had breached international law, the Prime Minister avoided giving a legal judgment. Instead, he repeated that international law remains the framework by which such actions should be assessed, adding that it was for Washington to explain and justify its decisions. This carefully balanced response was deliberate. By distancing Britain from the operation while declining to condemn it, Starmer sought to avoid escalating tensions with Washington. At the same time, he avoided language that could undermine Britain's long-standing support for sovereignty and the rules-based international order. The result was a position of restraint, cautious, controlled, and intentionally non-committal. The tone in London changed when attention shifted from Venezuela to Greenland. Following the US operation in South America, remarks from President Donald Trump and figures close to his administration revived the idea that the United States required Greenland for strategic defence purposes. The comments immediately unsettled European governments. Greenland is not an abstract territory. It is a semi-autonomous part of the Kingdom of Denmark, a NATO ally and a region of growing importance as Arctic routes, military surveillance and natural resources become more strategically valuable. Any suggestion that its future could be dictated by an external power carried implications far beyond Denmark itself. In Copenhagen, the rhetoric was met with alarm. Danish leaders warned that Greenland's status was not negotiable and that any threat to it would undermine trust within NATO. Those concerns quickly spread across Europe, where officials drew direct parallels between the Venezuela operation and the renewed talk of territorial control in the Arctic. For Britain, this marked a critical shift. Unlike Venezuela, Greenland sits firmly within Europe's security environment. The issue was no longer distant or theoretical. It now touched directly on European sovereignty, alliance unity, and NATO's credibility. Prime Minister Keir Starmer responded to the Greenland issue with a level of clarity that had been absent from Britain's reaction to events in Venezuela. Speaking publicly, Starmer said he stood with Denmark and made clear that the future of Greenland was not for outside powers to decide. He stated that decisions concerning Greenland must be made by Greenland itself and by the Kingdom of Denmark, and by no one else. The language was deliberate. Starmer did not criticise the United States directly, nor did he refer personally to President Trump. Instead, he framed Britain's position around sovereignty, alliance obligations and respect for international norms. By doing so, he aligned the UK firmly with Denmark while avoiding a broader diplomatic confrontation with Washington. This statement also carried weight because of where and how it was delivered. Starmer repeated his position in multiple interviews, reinforcing that it was not an off-the-cuff remark but an official stance of the British government. In diplomatic terms, the message was unmistakable. Britain was signalling that while it may exercise caution on distant conflicts, it would not remain silent when the territorial integrity of a European and NATO ally was questioned. Greenland, in this context, represented a line Britain was prepared to defend openly. The distinction lies in geography and security. Greenland sits within Europe's strategic sphere and plays a critical role in NATO's Arctic defence infrastructure. Any attempt by one NATO member to assert control over another's territory would place the alliance under unprecedented strain. British officials have made clear that while situations outside Europe may require careful diplomacy, challenges to European sovereignty demand a direct response. For London, Greenland represents a boundary that cannot be crossed without consequences. Starmer's approach has drawn scrutiny at home. Some Labour MPs and legal figures argue that Britain's caution on Venezuela risks undermining its commitment to international law. Others believe the Prime Minister is right to avoid escalation with Washington, while taking a principled stand when European security is at stake. The debate reflects broader concerns about Britain's post-Brexit role, balancing independence, alliance loyalty and international credibility. Britain's position on Greenland was quickly echoed across Europe as concern hardened into coordinated action. Leaders from France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Spain issued joint statements alongside Denmark, underlining that Greenland belongs to its people and that decisions about its future cannot be imposed from outside. The language marked an unusually direct response from European capitals toward Washington. Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz in reaffirming that Greenland's status is a matter for Denmark and Greenland alone. The emphasis was not only on sovereignty but on alliance trust, a core principle of NATO. European officials also stressed that Arctic security must remain a collective responsibility. Rather than unilateral action, they argued that NATO already provides the framework needed to address defence concerns in the region. Any attempt by a single member to assert control over another's territory, they warned, would undermine the alliance itself. For Britain, the coordinated response carried strategic importance. It allowed London to stand firm without acting alone, reinforcing Starmer's position through European unity. At the same time, it signalled to Washington that opposition to any move on Greenland was not isolated, but shared across Europe. The episode highlighted a rare moment of alignment driven by a shared concern over where recent US actions might lead next. The Greenland dispute has raised serious questions about NATO's cohesion. The alliance relies on trust among its members, particularly regarding territorial integrity. If that trust weakens, the credibility of NATO's collective defence commitments could be damaged. Britain's role as both a leading NATO power and Washington's closest European ally places it in a sensitive position. How London responds to future developments may shape the alliance's stability. Taken together, Britain's responses to Venezuela and Greenland reveal a clear pattern in how Prime Minister Keir Starmer is positioning the country on the world stage. In situations that are distant, complex and legally contested, the UK has chosen restraint. The emphasis has been on caution, process and maintaining diplomatic space. That approach reflects a desire to preserve relations with Washington while avoiding hasty judgments that could limit Britain's room to manoeuvre. Greenland, however, demonstrated where that restraint ends. When the issue moved into Europe's security environment and raised questions about the sovereignty of a NATO ally, Britain shifted from caution to clarity. The message was that some principles, territorial integrity, alliance trust, and collective security, are not negotiable. This has important implications for Britain's future foreign policy. It suggests that the UK intends to act as a stabilising force between the United States and Europe, supporting Washington where possible, but asserting clear limits when European security is at stake. The challenge ahead will be consistency. Future crises may test whether Britain can maintain this balance without being forced into sharper confrontation or deeper alignment. For now, the government's position is clear. Cooperation remains central, but Britain will speak out when core interests and alliances are directly affected.